Let's talk about the idea of sentiment analysis. This is a concept I just recently learned about. A good use case scenario outside of the world of teaching first deals with companies who may be getting reviews, large amounts of reviews from customers, and they want to get an idea of what exactly these customers are saying in those reviews without having to go through and read every single item. Sentiment analysis is a great tool in order to figure out, is there something you might be overlooking as a result of your own bias toward yourself or your product? The idea of sentiment analysis is an interesting one to apply into the world of speech and debate. Specifically, I saw it as an opportunity to analyze my students' ballots to help them find insights that they may have been looking over. I'll start by showing you a prompt that I put into Google Gemini. It's called the Congressional Debate Coach prompt. So you can see the text tells you what to copy and paste into each of the portions of the Google Gemini, which I've walked through before in an earlier video. So in the role category, it says you are an expert speech and debate coach with 20 years of experience in high school congressional debate, specifically in the National Speech and Debate Association, as well as the University Interscholastic League. Your goal is to analyze the judge ballots to provide actionable feedback for my students. Its task is to conduct an aspect-based sentiment analysis on the provided ballot text. Instead of a general positive or negative score, which is what sentiment analysis sometimes will do, break down the feedback into these 5 categories. And then the 5 categories provided for are structure, structure, delivery, content, stylistic choices, and judge idiosyncrasies. And you can see next to it specifically what I'm talking about. And then for the output format, I instruct it to give me a table because I want to be able to break down item by item for that student. Also a trend analysis, so what are the frequent wins and then what are the growth opportunities that that student displays according to their ballots. And then one big fix. Here I wanted it to identify something that student could do moving forward immediately in order to work on, practice, implement as a change, and then we see if we like that change. And then it has a spot to paste the ballot text. So I'll move over now to Google Gemini to show you what that looks like. Here on the gem editor, you can see I created a congressional debate analysis gem. I gave it a name, gave it a quick description so I'd remember what it was, but under the instructions, I simply copy and pasted that prompt in here. So there's the role I read through, the task, the output format that I wanted it to give me as well. The only other thing I didn't mention was the knowledge. So I wanted each time that I used this gem for it to reference a specific subset of materials. I told it I wanted it to evaluate it from an NSDA standpoint for congressional debate. So this document that I loaded into it as its knowledge base is an Intro to PF and Congress book. And it really is quite a book. So it's several pages. It's provided by NSDA. So it's something that anyone should have access to under the resources. And although there's information in here about public forum, it's also specific to congressional debate and then just argumentation structure as well. So that book of over 100 pages is what it's referencing. So let me back out of this. Now we'll show you what it looks like whenever it gives us the output. Here, as I look at the output that it gave me, first let me show you that I did put in a document, a Word document with that student's ballots. That was the easiest way for me to upload it, and I instructed it to conduct the analysis of the ballots from that congressional debate tournament. To maintain anonymity, I'm not including which student it was or anything like that, but you can see which tournament it came from here. So it's a tournament where that student got several rounds of ballots and ranks in order to give feedback. So it does that analysis and it gives a quick overview up here and says after reviewing those ballots, it saw that the student was a high-level competitor, ranking first in multiple rounds and consistently earning 5s and 6s on their speech scores. So already I'm impressed with its ability to analyze that information. It said that there were specific points that could be improved on. So in the table that I asked it to give me, it gives me a +5 to -5 score to kind of prioritize for that student what's working and what needs work. So the higher it is on that plus score, the more that it seems like they're on top of it, versus if it's trending toward that 0 or below 0, that's something that they can improve on. So in the structure, it mentions the judges led that student's layers of analysis. Funnily enough, that is a phrase that the student uses quite frequently in their signposting throughout the speech. It's something that we've discussed before. So judges put that on their ballot, it picks up on that. One of the reasons that the large language models like this, LLMs, are so good at sentiment analysis, specifically text-based sentiment analysis, is because large language models are meant to analyze language. That's what they're trained on, and therefore it's the way that they are most apt to serve us. So it makes sense that it would pick up on those language trends. Then under delivery, it mentions some things that stood out to it. It mentioned that scores were pulled down some because of theatricality and condescension. This is another discussion I've had with that student before. It's not that they mean to come across this way, of course, but in the moment, sometimes things do come across that way. And then content, stylistic choices. And then I was kind of interested in this judge idiosyncrasies aspect. I mentioned that there were several traditional judges who didn't love the fact that the student was going over into the grace period, as we sometimes call it, or over that 3-minute marker, and wanted to see more respect in the chamber from that student. Here it lists off some frequent wins. I was very impressed by the fact that it mentioned some of the actual arguments, and granted that means that the judges mentioned those in their speeches. And then I'll jump down to the growth opportunities for the sake of time and point out, we mentioned this condescension aspect. That was something that got brought up. Offense versus defense and what they were talking about. So it gives the student several things to work off of. It also links in there what it was that it was pulling directly from. You can see as I'm hovering over it, consider trimming a little bit from the speech. It's telling exactly what comment it's pulling that from for the student. So helps us avoid that trap of maybe we look over certain things due to bias. We don't want to have those conversations because they're a little more difficult. This points that out to us. And then for the one big fix, it gives my student an actionable step that they can take, some examples of what they could do to potentially do it. Okay, so one last thing I want to look at, which is how my student analyzed this ballot themselves. I put that output into a Google Doc and then shared it with my student so that that student could look at it. Like I said, I'm trying to maintain the anonymity of that student, as we honestly should be doing with AI, as much as we possibly can. So just out of respect for that student, you can see that the comments on here I actually put in as my own account so that that student's anonymity would be protected. Underneath the structure, you can see where it said some noted a need for stronger conclusions under time pressure. My student did this own analysis of themselves off of that. So they were asking what are specific ways they could signal that it's time to wrap up beyond the 3-minute gaveling period, so that grace period. They said they could have pre-planned one-liners to kick out of the speech and wrap things up more quickly. They could organize the speech in order of importance so that if they kick out of an argument towards the end, it's not that big of a deal. And then also start restructuring at 2:30 once they get that signal to make sure that they get everything in that they want to. Down here under the theatricality and condescension aspect, which came up multiple times, they said that they need to be aware of how they present themselves before their speech, don't make unnecessary jokes, and less is more when it comes to theatricality. So what this did is it kind of streamlined what I wanted that student to pay attention to. And granted, I could go in and make edits and make my own comments and share that with the student after a tournament. So it allows you to offer personalized feedback. Whenever you have a bigger batch of ballots, do this over multiple tournaments. You could do it over an entire semester, maybe over the entire year if you wanted to, if that student was coming back next year. And do it as a project where they analyze their own ballots using this large language model that's going to do a great job of picking up on those types of trends and that sentiment, and then pointing those things out to them in an unbiased manner. That's why I think that this is a tool that could be particularly useful for the speech and debate coach, no matter what event those students are competing in.